At 28,000 feet, something went wrong. Not an alarm, not a warning light. Something worse. The cabin was quiet. Passengers laughed, slept, trusted. They had no idea their lives were hanging by seconds. The man in the left seat didn't panic. His hands moved from memory, not fear. This wasn't his first emergency. Moments later, the radio crackled. A voice from a fighter jet paused mid-sentence. He had heard that call sign before, long ago. What happened next was not protocol. It was respect. And 147 people would never forget that flight. The aircraft was cruising smoothly at 28,000 feet. Inside the cabin, everything felt ordinary. A child pressed his face against the window, tracing shapes in the clouds. A business traveler reviewed slides on a tablet. A couple whispered plans for their vacation. No one noticed the subtle change in engine vibration. No one noticed the brief glance exchanged inside the cockpit. Captain Harris sat in the left seat, his posture relaxed but alert. His silver hair and lined face told a story long before his uniform ever could. He wasn't supposed to be flying anymore. At least that's what most people thought. But flying was not something you retire from. Flying lived in muscle memory, in instinct, in silence. The co-pilot adjusted his headset, eyes narrowing at the instruments. "Captain, you seeing this?" Harris didn't answer immediately. His eyes were already moving, fuel pressure, airflow, altitude hold. The numbers didn't scream danger. They whispered it. Years earlier, in a different aircraft, over a very different sky, Harris had learned something important. Machines fail quietly first. He reached forward, adjusting a control with practice calm. The co-pilot swallowed. "Sir, should we inform?" "Not yet," Harris said softly. His voice carried no fear, no rush, just certainty. A faint warning tone chimed, brief enough that most pilots might dismiss it. Harris didn't. His hand hovered over the radio, then pulled back. The cabin didn't need panic. Not yet. Outside, the sky was clean and endless. Too peaceful for what was building. A minor system fluctuation cascaded into another. Redundancy was holding, barely. The co-pilot's breathing quickened. "Captain, if this goes." "I know," Harris replied. He adjusted their heading by half a degree. A move so small it felt meaningless. Unless you knew exactly what you were doing. This wasn't training. This wasn't simulation. This was judgment forged decades earlier in jets that didn't forgive mistakes. Down below, 147 lives trusted a man they would never meet. A man whose name wouldn't appear in headlines. A man who once flew with a call sign the military still remembered. The radio crackled faintly. Distant traffic, routine chatter. Harris listened, then paused. Because somewhere beyond the clouds, something else had begun to move. And history was about to recognize him again. The warning didn't explode into chaos. That's what made it dangerous. No flashing red lights. No screaming alarms. Just a quiet disagreement between systems that were no longer talking to each other properly. The co-pilot stared at the panel, fingers hovering but unsure. He had trained for failures like this. Dozens of times in simulators, but simulators always told you what was wrong. Real aircraft didn't. Captain Harris leaned slightly forward, eyes calm, scanning patterns instead of numbers. "Hydraulics are compensating," the co-pilot said, trying to sound confident. "But not evenly." Harris nodded. He had felt it in the controls before the instruments admitted it. That was the difference between learning to fly and surviving long enough to understand it. Years ago, in a military jet that shook like it wanted to tear itself apart, Harris had learned to listen, not to alarms, but to behavior, to how the aircraft felt when it was lying. He adjusted trim manually. The plane responded slowly. That confirmed it. "Secondary systems lagging," Harris said. "We got time, but not much margin." The co-pilot exhaled. "Should I declare an emergency?" Harris paused. Declaring now would cause panic below, flight attendants rushing, passengers sensing fear before danger. "Not yet," he said again. "First, we stabilize." He rolled his shoulders once, loosening tension that never showed on his face. Outside the cockpit, the sky had changed. Clouds thickened ahead, not dangerous, but turbulent enough to complicate things. Harris altered altitude by a few hundred feet, choosing smoother air instinctively. The aircraft steadied. Down in the cabin, coffee cups rattled, then stopped. Passengers returned to their screens, unaware that their safety depended on calculations happening faster than thought. The co-pilot looked at Harris differently now, not as a senior captain, but as something else. "Sir, how did you know to adjust before the alert?" Harris didn't look up. "Because this plane flies like a jet that doesn't trust its left side anymore." The co-pilot blinked. "That's not in the manual." Harris allowed himself a faint smile. "Neither is surviving 147 souls at 28,000 feet. The radio crackled again, this time closer. Unidentified traffic had altered course. Air traffic control's voice came through, slightly sharper than before. "Commercial flight 721, confirm status. We're seeing minor deviation." Harris pressed the transmitter. 721 is stable," he said evenly. "Monitoring systems." The controller hesitated, then acknowledged. But someone else was listening. Hundreds of miles away, a radar screen updated. A routine blip adjusted course. That adjustment triggered a protocol, and protocol triggered fighters. The co-pilot noticed a new symbol forming on the navigation display. "Captain, are those?" Harris stared at the screen. "Two fast-moving contacts. Closing." "F-16s," he said quietly. The cockpit went silent. Fighter escorts weren't a problem, but they were never random. The radio crackled again, a deeper, disciplined voice cutting through the static. "Commercial 721, this is Falcon Lead. Maintain heading." Harris's fingers froze for half a second, not from fear, from memory. That voice carried a cadence he hadn't heard in decades. A cadence from another life, another sky, another call sign. He lifted the mic. "Falcon Lead," he replied, voice steady, 721 copies. There was a pause on the other end, too long for standard radio procedure. Then the fighter pilot spoke again, slower this time. "Say again, your captain's call sign?" Harris closed his eyes briefly. Some ghosts never leave the cockpit. The pause on the radio was subtle, but deadly accurate. In aviation, silence is never empty. It's a calculation. Captain Harris felt it before he understood it. That fractional delay, that hesitation that didn't belong in standard escort protocol. Fighter pilots didn't hesitate. They executed. "Commercial 721, Falcon Lead," said again, slower now, controlled. "Confirm captain identification." The co-pilot turned toward Harris, confused. That wasn't normal. Escorts confirmed aircraft, not people. Harris rested his thumb against the transmit button, breathing once through his nose. This was not the sky he had left behind, but the sky remembered him. "Captain Harris," he said. "Former military." Another pause, longer this time. Static crackled softly, like distant rain. Then a different voice came through, sharper, younger, but careful. "Sir, request your call sign." The co-pilot's eyes widened. Call signs were not casual information. They were earned, buried with careers, left behind with uniforms folded and stored away. Harris looked forward through the windshield. Blue sky, white cloud tops, peaceful eyes. For a moment, he considered not answering. But truth had weight. Call sign was Iron Shepherd. The radio went completely silent. No acknowledgement, no correction, no response. The co-pilot felt his pulse in his ears. "Captain, did you?" "Wait," Harris said quietly. 30 seconds passed. In that half minute, the aircraft drifted into perfect formation between the two F-16s. Not because Harris commanded it, but because Falcon Lead adjusted first. That was not protocol. That was respect. Finally, the radio returned. But the voice was different now. Lower, slower, measured. "Iron Shepherd," Falcon Lead said. "This is Falcon Lead." Harris closed his eyes. No rank, no verification code, just the name. "You flew Northern Corridor," the fighter pilot continued. 23 years ago. Emergency extraction during a storm cell." Harris swallowed. He remembered that night. Bad visibility. Worse intelligence. A damaged transport bleeding fuel while enemy radar swept the sky. He remembered choosing altitude over safety margins. He remembered counting seconds. He remembered the call sign, spoken like a prayer. "I was a cadet," Falcon Lead said. "They used your maneuver in training. Said no one should ever have survived it." Harris exhaled slowly. "Well," he said, "we didn't have better options." The fighter pilot almost laughed, but caught himself. "Sir, you're carrying passengers." 147, Harris replied. Another pause. This one felt heavier. "Then we're staying with you," Falcon Lead said. "All the way." The co-pilot stared at Harris. Escort duration beyond protocol required authorization. Layers of it. But no one challenged it. Air traffic control adjusted corridors without asking why. Other flights rerouted silently. The sky made space. Harris adjusted his heading slightly, feeling the aircraft respond more honestly now, as if reassured. The systems still weren't perfect, but they were cooperating. "Falcon Lead," Harris said. "I don't need heroes today." "You won't get them," the fighter pilot replied. "Just eyes." Minutes passed. Cloud layers thickened below them, but the Escort held position. Close enough to see helmet visors. Far enough to avoid wake turbulence. The co-pilot finally spoke, voice low. "Captain, who were you?" Harris didn't answer immediately. "Who you were was not the same as who you are." "I was someone who made decisions when no one else could," he said. "Like today." The co-pilot nodded. Down in the cabin, a flight attendant paused mid-step, sensing something shift. Not danger, but certainty. Passengers felt it too. The aircraft felt steadier, calmer, as if guided by something older than software. Falcon Lead's voice returned. "We've cleared your descent corridor," he said. "Weather diverted. Emergency services standing by quietly." Harris smiled faintly. "Thank you," he said. "No," the fighter pilot replied. "Thank you, Iron Shepherd." The call sign echoed once more across the sky. And for the first time in decades, Harris didn't feel like a relic. He felt like exactly what the moment required. Descent always felt longer than ascent. Gravity did the work, but judgment did the timing. Captain Harris began the gradual drop without announcing it. No dramatic pitch. No sudden change. Just a smooth transition that the aircraft accepted without argument. The instruments whispered instead of argued now. That mattered. "Speed stable," the co-pilot said, more to himself than to Harris. "Keep it that way," Harris replied. Below them, the cloud deck waited, thick, gray, layered like folded steel. Visibility would vanish soon. Systems that behaved at altitude often revealed their lies during descent. That's when weak components confessed. Falcon Lead stayed tight, off the left wing. "Iron Shepherd," the fighter pilot said. "We're reading minor oscillation on your aft section." Harris nodded, though the pilot couldn't see it. "Compensating," he replied. "Let me know if it worsens." "Copy." The co-pilot glanced at Harris. "They're reading things we can't." "They're meant to," Harris said. Different eyes. The aircraft entered the cloud layer. Daylight disappeared. Sound changed. Rain tapped against the fuselage, light, then heavier. Turbulence nudged the plane, testing its mood. A few passengers looked up. Seatbelt signs chimed softly. Nothing alarming. Everything critical. Harris adjusted descent rate by a fraction, refusing to rush gravity. Every foot mattered. Every decision stacked on the last. He remembered another descent, decades ago, dropping through weather with a wounded aircraft and a cargo bay full of men who trusted him without question. This felt the same. Different faces. Same weight. The co-pilot broke the silence. "Captain, if the primary actuator fails on final." "We won't let it," Harris said. "Not confidence. Intention." Falcon Lead's voice cut in again. "Ground confirms emergency services are positioned beyond visual range." Media blackout in effect. Harris almost smiled. Someone understood. No sirens. No panic. Just readiness. The aircraft cleared the lowest cloud layer. Runway lights appeared, distant, steady, waiting. Harris lined up manually. Autopilot was a luxury he didn't trust today. Hands on yoke. Feet alive on pedals. The plane responded sluggishly, but honestly, like an old horse that needed patience, not force. Wind gusted from the right. Harris corrected without thinking. The co-pilot monitored numbers, but watched Harris. This wasn't textbook flying. This was memory in motion. At 1,000 feet, the warning tone chirped once. Not failure. A reminder. Landing checklist, the co-pilot said. Harris didn't look away from the runway. Continue. Gear down. Flaps extended. Hydraulics complained, then complied. Falcon lead adjusted position, drifting slightly higher. We've got you, the fighter pilot said. Harris answered quietly. I know. At 500 feet, the aircraft wobbled. A brief lateral shudder that might have scared a less experienced hand. Harris corrected with pressure, not movement. The plane steadied. Passengers felt the firmness. Not fear, but seriousness. Conversation stopped. Heads lifted. Hands tightened around armrests. The runway rushed up. Harris eased the nose. Not too early. Not too late. The main wheels kissed asphalt. Not slammed. Not floated. Perfect. Reverse thrust engaged smoothly. Deceleration pressed everyone forward gently. The co-pilot exhaled for the first time in minutes. The aircraft slowed to taxi speed. Silence filled the cockpit. Thick, almost sacred. Then the tower spoke. Commercial 7-1, welcome back. Harris guided the plane off the runway. No cheers. No applause. Just breathing. Falcon lead's voice returned one last time. Iron Shepherd, Escort terminating. It's been an honor. Harris keyed the mic. Fly safe, he said. The fighters peeled away, disappearing into cloud and distance. The sky closed behind them like it always does, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But 147 lives were rolling safely on concrete because an old call sign still mattered, and because experience never truly retires. The aircraft came to rest at the far end of the taxiway. Engines idled. The kind of silence that followed wasn't relief. Not yet. It was processing. Captain Harris set the parking brake and rested his hands in his lap for a moment longer than necessary. Years of habit told him not to move until the aircraft was truly done speaking. Only then did he look at the co-pilot. We're clear, the co-pilot said quietly. Harris nodded. Outside, emergency vehicles remained still. No flashing lights. No rushing crews. Just presence. Exactly as requested. In the cabin, passengers began to sense the difference. Phones came out. Messages were typed. But something held them back from standing too quickly. A collective instinct that something important had happened, even if they didn't yet understand it. The intercom chimed. Harris reached for it, then paused. He wasn't sure what to say. Truth mattered, but spectacle didn't. He pressed the button. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, voice calm and ordinary. Welcome to your destination. Thank you for your patience during descent. That was it. No mention of escorts. No drama. No heroics. The cabin exhaled. Applause came anyway, tentative at first, then fuller. Not because they knew details, but because they felt safe again. Flight attendants moved down the aisle, smiling more genuinely than training required. As the door opened, daylight spilled in. Passengers disembarked slowly. Some glanced toward the cockpit. Others didn't. Most never would. That was fine. Then a uniformed airport operations officer stepped inside. Not loud, not official. Respectful. Captain Harris? He asked. Yes. You're requested outside. Harris followed. On the tarmac, away from cameras and terminals, two figures waited. Falcon lead removed his helmet. He was younger than Harris expected. Late 30s, maybe. Lines of discipline already etched into his face. He stopped 2 steps short and saluted. Not casually, not theatrically, precisely. Harris returned it. Instinctively, perfectly, before remembering he was no longer required to. But some things don't expire. Sir, the fighter pilot said, lowering his hand. My father flew with you. Harris felt something tighten in his chest. He told me about Iron Shepherd before he told me how to fly. The words landed heavier than any metal ever had. I just did my job, Harris replied. Falcon lead shook his head. No, sir. You taught others how to do theirs. They stood in silence for a moment. Then the fighter pilot extended his hand. Harris took it. Firm, respectful, equal. Those passengers will never know, Falcon lead said. They don't need to, Harris replied. Inside the terminal, passengers watched through glass, curious, confused. No announcements were made. No explanations offered. Life resumed, as it always does. Harris collected his bag and walked alone toward the exit. No press, no ceremony, no recognition, just the quiet satisfaction of another safe landing. Outside, the sky looked ordinary again. He paused, looking up. Somewhere above, 2 jets were already specks. The radio was silent, but the call sign still echoed where it mattered. Iron Shepherd, not because he asked for it, but because he earned it and never stopped deserving it.